Hey guys, this is SunLogic14 here with a brand new video on my channel, and this is a little bit of KSP gameplay. Here I'm going to be showing you how to make a craft that can go to Minmus. And I'll start off by putting some parts together. First thing we'll try and do is make the lander. And I have some parts I can choose from right here. You want to choose one that has the best capacity for Kerbals. If you're playing on a different mode, you may have different options. Right now, I'm in sandbox mode, so I have everything unlocked. But if you're like in career mode or in science mode, you probably would have to work your way up through these skill trees and unlock all these parts. But it's good to assume that you're all going to be learning how to play this game, so the best way to do that is in sandbox mode. So I'm going to go ahead and just pick one of these. I want to pick the first command pod. It's probably the baseline size that you'd probably be using at the very start of the game. I want to put a heat shield. On this, it should be this size. Heat shield. For that one. And then you'll put a parachute on top to make sure it can come back and land safely. And after that, you really just pick out whatever parts you want to use to make the lander. So after that, you want to add a decoupler, which is this size, I think. And basically, anything that's attached to this capsule will detach at the last stage. Next thing, you want to add some fuel, or sometimes it's good to have some RCS thrusters, just to have. This is an RCS tank. This is like an extra, a different type of fuel. It's more like a tiny bit of thrust. This definitely not like something you'd use to get into orbit with. It's something just to like keep you inlined and to help you move your craft a little bit easier. And mostly is used for docking and rendezvous with multiple other crafts or multiple crafts at once. Mostly to help build like stations up in orbit or whatever you want to do with docking. There's plenty of things you can do with that. You can also like harvest asteroids by putting a clamp on top of rockets and like a claw, and you can grab them and you can grab resources from them and pull them back into a stable orbit around the Earth or Kerbin, and that's probably one of the missions you'll get in career mode. But that's kind of like I'm kind of bored. Let's see what we can do with random parts, kind of thing. You know, that's not something you would do normally in this game, but you can. I guess it could be fun, but I don't usually try to do that stuff. I usually like just going to planets and exploring things. And if I'm in career mode, I would just try to build up like my economy and get it to where I can pretty much go anywhere. But for right now, let's see about getting these parts for this Minmus landing. For Minmus, you don't really need a lot of fuel to land on or to escape because it has a very low gravity. It doesn't like take nearly as much fuel as it would to take off if you're on the moon. So I wouldn't put, but maybe I'm choosing either between this one and that one. If you feel like you can, if you need a little bit of leeway, I'd put this one on. But for me, I believe I can get away with just this one and put a, which one is it called? That one, the Terrier engine. That has plenty of thrust to weight ratio to for this craft to lift off, and it should be plenty to land and to take off and go back to Kerbin after that. Next things after that, you want to put some landing legs on it. If you're doing this for the first time, you may end up having either one of these or one of these. Either one is fine, but just remember that the lower the grade they are, the more or the less tolerance they're gonna have to of landing at higher speeds. Most of the time you're gonna be landing on the surface around 10 meters per second or less. If not, they end up breaking the legs off, and you won't be able to land or take off safely. But in this case, I want to choose these ones, and I want to put it on 4x symmetry, and then I want to select it and then select or start extended, or it's going to just bring them in close so they're not like causing drag or take up a lot of space when you're trying to go up on your first initial launch. Next things you want to set up the orbiting stage, or the stage is going to get you to Minmus. We can choose a right decoupler on this. No, not that one. This one. Okay. In this part, you probably don't have many options for tanks. But for me, I have the whole lot right here. I'm gonna go ahead and just choose one of these just to change the size from that size to the next stage up, which would give us a little more fuel, and I guess this size, yes, that one. I don't know if y'all have these size if you don't have the Making History DLC or whatever DLC this came in. So I'm going to choose a different size just to be sure. I choose, no, that's too big. Which one is it? Probably just go from that size to this one. That's too long. I know there's one that went from. Is that it? I think that is. It's kind of weird how they arrange these tanks. Yes, that size, and then you're gonna put the equivalent of this engine on the bottom of that. This isn't the right size. This is like the Saturn V size. Main cell engine maybe. But if you want to go for efficiency, you want to use a nuclear engine. But it'll take a little bit longer to get to place. But you could definitely put these on. I don't know what stage y'all are in your tech tree or whatever. So this is pretty high up there. You're probably towards the end of the tech tree, so you won't have this right away. But once you do, you can go pretty much anywhere. But it just takes a little bit longer because the burns will be longer because they're not like as powerful. Like you can see the thrust rate ratio over here. Like you get 60 over here in a vacuum versus your ones over here, the swivel engine and the Reliant engine. You get like 240, 215. And then you get these right here that are really good to transfer windows between Kerbin and other bodies. Like you can go all the way to Duna and Eve pretty easily on these. These are really used just for the bottom stage, like the first stage. I guess I would use this one. It has 300 in a vacuum, or this one. This one I used in the last video to land on the surface of the moon, which the moon needed a little bit more thrust to take off from the surface. It didn't take very much. Either moon around Kerbin is pretty easy to take off from. But especially this one because it has very low gravity, so that's why I'm using the smaller engine. Um, so this stage will be what gets us into orbit and also transfers us from Kerbin to Minmus. And then you're going to have a first stage. I'll bring this up a little bit so I don't run out of room. Okay, and then you go from there. You want to put a lower stage. Oh, it's not attaching. Is it upside down? Is it being stubborn? Hold on, let me do something else here. This is another option you can do. I don't know if they have this on Xbox or not. It's basically a clamp that's shielded. You put the engine on the inside, and it's not like a normal decoupler. It's like it's hidden on the inside. What is that? Okay, I think it's the 4X symmetry that's screwing up right now. There we go. Okay, and then you put the engine underneath, or the tank underneath that. There's two options there at the bottom. There's one that attaches straight to the engine. You don't want to use. You want to use the one that's underneath, which covers this whole thing. Basically, it's a decoupler that shields it, but it's not directly attached to the engine. So when it decouples, it'll just leave the engine there, and nothing else will come off. Just the tank will fall off. That's it. I'm gonna add just one more of these at the bottom. And then I want to put the engine on the bottom, the Mammoth engine for this size. I think it's the wrong size. That's the wrong size. Actually, I'm going to go one stage higher on this. I want to put one of these on there. And then you're going to put this is the stage that gets you into your orbit around Kerbin. So you need enough to get around 100 kilometers. First, that one, and then another one. And then I put the Mammoth engine on the bottom. This is basically where you check your craft's parts and mass. If you don't have like everything unlocked, like if you're playing in career or in science mode, you have to unlock the certain buildings in the landing platform outside, or the takeoff platform, not the landing one. But you have to upgrade those to be able to add more parts to it, and also to help with the mass of the rocket. Since I'm in creative mode, I have no restriction on mass or how many parts I can use. I think that's part of a DLC where you could check your delta V, your thrust to weight ratio. I'm not really sure how to use that yet. I'm trying to figure that out, but most of the time I just add more boosters and tanks until it works. That's usually what the best strategy would be. If I'm just like clueless on what I'm doing, I just slap shit on there and hope it works. But I'm pretty sure I've done this a couple times. This is plenty enough to do what I'm doing. The next thing is, if you're doing science mode, you would probably want to add some science like gadgets on it. I would put one of these on there, and you can just shove this up in there just to make the profile of the lander a little bit smaller. Just make it where you can still like select it, and open it and do stuff with. And then you can attach that back on there. And then you put, these are probably the first things you unlock when you first start getting science, is these mystery goo containers and the science junior module. Those are probably the first things you'll get, but then you'll get these other ones. These really just, this one's for pressure, I think. This one's for atmospheric reading. This one's for, oh, actually, that's for to read like earthquakes, and if you like, you can wreck your vehicles into a surface or a planet or moon. And this will read the seismic tremor that you create when you impact the surface, and it collects that data for science. It's usually used for like putting on like ground bases, and you have like these little things that you put on the surface on, like these here. These are like the ones you can place with your Kerbal on the planet or surface of a moon or planet to collect data and send them back to Kerbin. This is like another way of collecting science. But I don't know if you have that unless you have the DLC for it. So I'm gonna assume you don't have those and you have only these. You probably won't have these unless you have the DLC as well. But those are like rover cameras, and you put them on rovers and you can scan things like rocks and craters and volcanic stuff on planets and moons. So you put like a temperature gauge on there. You put, I don't want to put two of them on there, just put one. Temperature of one. And then put one of these on there. And you put one of these on there. What else? You can't put these on there, but it really doesn't give a lot of science. These read the atmospheric. These are things you want to use while you're in flight around a Kerbin or a new planet that has an atmosphere. That's really the only time you'll ever need one of these. But since we're going to Minmus, there is no atmosphere or oxygen or anything like that, so you don't really need that. The only two places I know for sure that have that are Jewel, a planet, or it's actually a moon. That's mostly ocean, and then there's an atmosphere and around Eve, and there's also Duna has an atmosphere. That's probably the only time you ever need to really use that. I need to put some thrusters on this. We put 4x symmetry. The reason I do 4x symmetry on these because it has all four angles that you would probably need for left, right, and back. Raise it up all the way. There's something else I need to add. I need to add a battery or some batteries. I'll just go ahead and add this size battery, just one of them on here. And then you want to have something that can recharge the battery with, so you want to put solar panels on it. I'm going to put these smaller ones on there so you'll have a lower profile. You can put these bigger ones on there, but if you're doing career mode, you probably want to do some of the cheaper ones that doesn't cost them much. in this case, I don't really have to worry about that, so I want to put some down here. If you wanted to make it where this stage could be controlled, so you can like deorbit it to create less clutter and space, like less space junk, you would probably go and put one of these on here. It's in the crew options. You go over here and it's one of the probes. Choose the right size that goes with that. And then you can put that on there, and that makes this thing act like it's a craft that you can control. And in this instance, you probably would want one, because this stage will probably either be stuck in an orbit or you're probably using it to land. I'm going to head put a battery on the side of it. I don't think I need a big battery for this, but 4 of these little boys on there. And then those solar panels charge this up. Make sure this thing has plenty of power to control itself, because if it don't, it'll just be a dead weight. You won't be able to control it without power. So let's just say that's almost good. I don't think we need any side boosters for this. We may or may not. Let me just try it and see. I think there's plenty. There is another way you can get less drag when you're trying to leave. There's these protective shells, and they vary in size depending on which part you're using. And you can just wrap your craft in them so that they don't create any drag when you're trying to get out of Earth's or Kerbin's atmosphere. I usually just put one there, so whenever the shell comes off, it won't affect the rest of the craft on that part. It just covers, just like a fairing. That's what they're really called. You probably want to put a comms on there. You put some of these on there so you can. In some cases, if you're using a probe, like an unmanned probe, you want to have a comms dish so you can communicate back with the command center. But in this case, we're not going very far, so you don't need something very big. So you probably just put one of these on there. They got stuck inside the end, but I think it's fine. It's in there somewhere. I think that's it. Let me just name this thing Minmus Landa. Okay. And then you want to, before you launch, you want to make sure your staging is correct. So this is the first stage. This engine goes off. And then the next one should be a clamp with the engine, which I want to put them on the same stage. So the clamp will go off at the same time the engine does. And then the next stage, you can choose. It really doesn't matter on this part. You can be this clamp comes off, the fairing comes off, or you can choose that's the last stage. When we put those together, that's the clamp that detaches this part from this last lander stage. So those two are together, and then that's the last clamp that detaches everything from the capsule, which will come back to Kerbin at the end of the mission. And then there's a parachute at the top that brings you back safely. That's pretty much it on that part. To make these solar panels a little bit easier to use, you can set action groups. So if you have on controller, you can set an action group by pressing on the D-pad, and you can select whatever 1, you want to select these two. So I want to put these on custom 1. So whenever I press 1 on my keyboard, these will toggle, which will extend or come back. So depending on how many times I need to use that, I can just freely open and close instead of having to go around and select each one of these to extend the solar panel. And just press one button and all of them will extend. I'm going to choose a crew. I guess that pilot's fine. And then I save and then I launch. It's probably going to be a pretty long video because I'm not going to be able to speed it up. Be doing it live. At this point, you can wait till the sun comes up so you can see a better view of everything, but you want to look and see where this is where we're going. So set target, basically highlight it and you select it and you set target, and that highlights the Minmus and its orbiting line. Minmus is kind of on a slanted orbit. It's not exactly equatorial orbit like the moon is, so it doesn't really matter on our ascent on if we're trying to get it a perfect orbit or not, because we're going to change that once we go into our transfer stage that we're trying to burn to catch up with the moon. So for right now, we're just going to try and get to an equatorial orbit around Kerbin, and then we'll make our plan to go to Minmus that way. So let me get us into the sunlight here. Just so y'all can see what's going on, because I know it's kind of dark. Alright. Alright. So the best way to go about this is to make sure that you're throttled up for one, and then you change the engine, and then you just slightly start tilting to the right 90 degrees on the nav ball. You want to be heading about 45 degrees by the time you get to 10 meters, I think is what it is. Yeah, 10 meters. Or 10,000 meters, not 10. So I'm gonna keep tilting over. See where the 90 is on this nav ball. That's 45 degrees. 90 that's north, that's south, that's east and west. I assume. Unless I'm wrong, and don't be pissed when I don't know my directions. I'm kind of losing it. Oh shit! Oh fuck. Let me redo that. Revert flight. In that case, if you have a fail launch, you want to go back to either launch or assembly. In this case, I want to go to assembly. And I'm going to strut this thing up a little bit so we have a little more stability. These are strut connectors. You want to have these if you're having problems with your craft not being stable or it's like wobbly. You go in, you add these into your craft to keep them from moving around too much. We move them over this way and up. Put them there, I guess. And then I want to put some more down here. These do create drag on your craft, so be mindful of that. If you're trying to build like an airplane, you don't put too many on these because it may put too much drag on your plane or whatever you're trying to do, because it's pretty like bad on drag. But in this case, I'm not too worried about it because there's plenty of power to get us off the surface with this. Let's save that. I think that's good. I was kind of wobbly there. The other way I could get more control out of this if I added fins, which I didn't do. I'll probably end up doing that too. Should I go back? Get the sunlight. Jump fucking all the way back around, didn't I? Okay, let me not do that again. Okay. Third time's a charm, I guess. Okay, let me do this. Let me zoom out so you can see what's going on. And then throttle up. For control wise, this Mammoth engine has vectoring on the engines, so it has it can move side to side, forward and backwards. Like it has a full 360 gimbal range, which means it can control the craft pretty easily on without fins. But if you're using one that's just like doesn't have gimbal at all, you want to add fins if you're trying to do what I'm doing right now. But in this case, I don't really need them because the vectoring on these engines do it for me to help keep the craft stable. I'm at 10,000. I waited too long to get to. Well, each craft is a little different. You probably want to do a bit slower. Back to launch again. I'm kind of being distracted trying to talk and do at the same time. Let me figure this out. We not go past the sunlight this time. Okay, throttle up. This time I want to go ahead and just get it around where I want it to be before we get to just the air resistance. When I get to a certain point in my flight, kind of is messing me up a little bit. What is happening? Okay, I'm about to put some fins on this thing just so I can have a little more control of this thing. Another thing you could check is your center of mass. This right here basically tells you where your center of mass is in the craft, so that you know where to focus on, like keeping the craft stable. So if all the mass is at the lower part of the rocket, you want to put some fins down here. Be the best way to control it is to put them down low here. And this blue marker here, that's the center of lift of the craft. But since it's a rocket, it's going to be dead center. But if it's like a plane, that's going to shift depending on where you put your lifting fins and wings and stuff. But I'll do a different video on how to make planes. But for right now, let's get this thing off the launch pad and into orbit. Maybe, hopefully this time's going to work. I didn't have nearly as much problems with the last craft as I did with this one so far. So this one's kind of being weird with me. Make sure I don't pass the sunlight here this time. Boom. Okay. Throttle up. I might wait a little bit longer to get to 45. I may just get to around 15,000 when I hit the 45 angles. Just so I don't flip out like I did last time. See, these fins are kind of helping a little bit more to help me keep it stable. You can see how they change whenever I move. Right now, let's keep tipping over. Keep tipping over. Keep tipping over. This is basically creating your flight of your orbit, keeping you in the right direction. This time I'm doing a lot better because of those fins. I want to throttle down a little bit because we don't need this much power to get us into an orbit. This also will save a little fuel, so you can have a little more fuel when you're trying to do your orbiting stage. So you could probably use this lower stage to get you into an orbit, maybe. Okay, let me check my orbit so far. Yeah, I'm at 80,000. I want to get to around 90 or 100 to be safe. That's probably what you want to do, get to about 100. And then from there, you want to click the center of your apoapsis, which is your highest point in your flight path. And then you want to select and then make a maneuver. And then you got these options. You got retrograde, prograde, and then you got all these other ones which go in other directions other than prograde and retrograde. But for this instance, I want to go prograde so we can get an orbit path. And this is basically a planner for your orbit. So you can decide where you want to go before you do it. And then you can create your start of your burn and your. So that's telling me that to get into an orbit, I need 1,049 meters per second of. That's how fast I need to be getting to want to get to an orbit. It's around 2,200 meters per second to get into a stable orbit, which I should have plenty of fuel to do with this lower stage, which I know because it doesn't have a white line in between to break off to tell me that the stage I'm on is going to run out before I finish the burn. So I'm going to go ahead and get this craft in the right angle. So in this case, you want to use, these are options here that you can choose to select things on your nav ball so that the SAS here will go ahead and align me with whatever node I'm selecting. In this case, I want to select my target maneuver node so that it will line itself up with that so that I can just go ahead and do my burn at the target maneuver that I had created with my maneuver node, which gets me going in the right direction. And then I watch this as it climbs, and then I can shut it off because I feel like it's not going to go exactly how my maneuver was planned out. So I'm going to go ahead and warp over to my apoapsis and just burn prograde just to make it stable. Then I'm just going to do slight puffs of the engine until I get into a stable orbit. It's kind of heavy, so I'm kind of going to be swinging around a little bit. Let me go ahead and detach this and then turn on RCS. This craft is so heavy right now because it has the whole entire rocket still here. It's not going to be able to do very much of anything with these thrusters because they're not really. If I was going to be able to control this thing with RCS, you would probably need thrusters here and thrusters down here. But most of the time, you're not going to have this lower stage to worry about to create all this extra weight. I'm going to just keep this thing. No, I'm going to just detach this thing. Now I have just this stage to worry about, which causes less weight. And then I'm going to press my 1 key to extend my solar panels, and you see them all going out at once. Alright. So now we're in a stable orbit, and we have our stage has our first stage has been detached and is stuck in orbit, which is probably not what I wanted to do, but I did it anyway because YOLO, it's a sandbox save and I really don't care. But in this case, I'm going to plan a maneuver that will get us to Minmus. So you want to set his target, and then you see this white dashed line. That is the time where my orbit is in line with Minmus's orbit. So I'm going to go ahead and put my maneuver node directly on the center of that white line. I'm going to go move this thing prograde until I see encounter node. See, there's my closest encounter. There's two white lines that indicates my path versus Minmus's path. So when these two meet in the middle, that's going to show. Let me try to get closer here. See, when those two collide, it creates an encounter. So you can go in, and this is also the option. Once you get an encounter with whatever you're going for, you can go to focus view, and then you can zoom in, and then you can really fine tune your maneuver. Lower that down. Well, in this case, it's not going to be able to do much because we're kind of doing the transfer burn. Once you get a maneuver or an encounter with whatever we're trying to do, we can do that first burn, and then we can do another maneuver mid-flight, and then we can course correction to get us on whatever plane you want to be in. So if you want to get in an equatorial orbit around Minmus, or you can get into a polar orbit. It's just depending on what you want to do in whatever case you're trying to do. But in this case, I want to get into an equatorial orbit. So when I burn, I'm just going to get an encounter, get it done, and I want to do a mid-course correction, and I want to get us into a good flat equatorial orbit around Minmus, so that we can plan out our landing site, which will probably be on the light side of the planet, so you can see what's going on. That's usually the rule of thumb. You want to try and land either somewhere flat or in the sunlight for your first landing. And then you can make a rover at one point, and you can go and explore the whole entire thing. But in this case, I'm just doing my first landing, so I'm going to go ahead and warp to my next maneuver, and I'm going to set my maneuver node to be where I'm targeting at. And then it tells you your time to your maneuver, and then your burn time is going to be 56 seconds. So you want to be like your time to T, which is your burn time. You want to do it before you get your burn. Like a minute burn time should be the same as a minute to your T node. So I'm going to go ahead and start my burn now, because it takes that amount of time to get to your final part of the burn. I don't know if I'm explaining that very well, but I'm going to go ahead and burn before I get to the end of my maneuver node, so that it's going to be perfect or close to what my maneuver is saying it's going to be. Once I get an encounter, you can see my apoapsis is increasing because I'm burning prograde toward my target. And then once I get, say I already passed the moon, I'm going to start slowing down so I can make sure I get my encounter. This is basically just throttling down and then pressing X to cancel, and then you go back, throttle down. And then there, I got my encounter. See it? It came up. You can close that out. and then you can go ahead and plan out another maneuver. I'm going to go ahead and do one right here. I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to, this is the one that goes up and down. I want to go down, and then I'm going to go, this is left and right, so I'm going to go over this way, and then down again. I'm going to zoom in so I can see what's going on. I want to go, oop, that's too much. Go back down, and then over. And then if you're doing a like an Apollo style mission where you have two capsules docked together, and then once you get into an orbit around the moon, you leave the first stage in orbit, and then you land the lander on the surface, and then you get back into an orbit, and then redock to the main craft. You want to have this orbit where you go back from left to right, so when you swing around, you're going to be going to burn away from the planet, which will give you a less amount of fuel burn that you'll need otherwise. You're basically burning against the planet's rotation of gravity, which slows you down more. We're trying to leave. But if you're trying to burn with the planet's like orbit, that would make it where you'd have to burn for a lot longer to escape that surface. You get my drift? You want to burn against instead of with. So it's easier to escape. So that is where I'm going to put my maneuver. 29 meters above the surface. And then I'll go ahead and just select. Let me zoom out so I can select it here. It's kind of wonky here. Let me just go ahead and select that brown line, and then it says warp to next maneuver. I'll go ahead and do that, and then I'm going to select my maneuver node on my nav ball, and then it says time to T is 58 seconds, but my burn time is only 4 seconds, so I'm going to wait to 4 seconds on my maneuver to start burning. So go ahead and just line it up. It's lining up for me since I have SAS turned on and I have my maneuvers selected. You can see Kerbin back there. You can see the moon right there. I'm not sure where Minmus is at. But we're about to make our mid-correction burn so that we can get us onto a good path. This stage had plenty of fuel to get us to where we need to be. And this is a very small burn, only 78 meters per second to get us on the right path. So I'm going to go ahead and burn. And then I'm going to slow it down. And then I'm going to watch. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and just take this off at this point. You want to just watch it by eyeball. Okay. Perfect. And then at this point you have your encounter planned out, and you know you want to go ahead and make another maneuver here, and then you want to burn retrograde to capture your orbit around Minmus. This is your capture burn. So we want to put it in a stable orbit, which makes it 28 meters, 20, I guess. Or if you want to try and get it perfect, you put 28, 28 on each side. But in this case, that is pretty good. And I'm going to burn here, or I'm going to burn. I'm going to warp here. So that's going to speed up my craft, and then it's going to get to that point where I selected. And then I'm going to select my maneuver node, and then or my orbiting plan out here, and then warp to that. And then I'm going to select my maneuver node again, which will be pretty much or retrograde, which will be exactly retrograde because that's all it is. So you could just burn retrograde at the end of your apoapse or periapse. Your periapse is your lowest point in your orbit, and your apoapse is your highest point in your orbit. So I'm going to burn at periapse retrograde to lower my apoapse down. So you can see my planned periapse is 24 meters, and my planned apoapse is 28. I'm going to try and hit that by burning retrograde. These other ones are normal, anti-normal, radial out, and radial in. Basically, radial out is basically dead center of red, and radial in I think is top of blue, and then the other ones are basically opposite of prograde and retrograde. It's just up and down of. I'm gonna go ahead and burn because I missed it kinda, but it's not too bad. Boom, that's fine. That's kind of sloppy, but I'm not really trying to get into a perfect orbit. I'm just trying to get into an orbit so I can land this thing. When you start picking out your landing spot, you want to choose somewhere flat for your first time. So these are the Minmus flats. These ones, and there's plenty of other ones around, but you want to choose the one that's on the light side of the planet for right now so you can see what's going on. I'm going to go ahead and put my maneuver here. And then I'm going to burn again retrograde so I can descend. Because I have so much fuel in this thing, I'm probably going to end up using this stage to land as well. I'm just going to detach it. See, you really didn't need this much fuel to get to Minmus, but I kind of went overkill. But might as well have something like this if we're doing this for the first time, just to get to the use of knowing what's going on. Better to have all this fuel to learn than having to look and check and make sure you have enough fuel to even do things. In this case, I have plenty of fuel, which I have zero worry I'm able to do this mission or not. So I'm going to go ahead and, since I'm in a stable orbit, I'm going to go ahead and save this before I do my landing burn, just in case I mess with the landing or I wreck or crash or whatever. I can reload the save, I can retry again. Okay, at this point, I'm going ahead and just fast forward until I get to 3 seconds. And then I'm going to burn retrograde. You see that line going down. Then I want to turn off that node. And then I'm going to go back and see. So now I'm going to be descending down to the surface of Minmus. I'm going to go ahead and fast forward because I know I'm going to move pretty good here. Okay, I'm just. This is really overkill. I really didn't need as much fuel, but I did it anyway. I felt like I needed it. Just watch out. I did a barely puff, and I didn't have to. I don't need this much, but I have plenty of fuel and plenty of leeway here on this craft. So I'm probably going to go ahead and detach this thing, just to act like this was not even here, and this was just a normal landing. You can either press G to extend your landing legs, or you can click up here and it does it for you. You can also set it to an action group, so you can press like any number or whatever you want to use to extend that. Sorry, I had to let you go. You're expensive, I know, but we're in sandbox mode, so we're not worried about it. In most cases, you'd probably leave that in orbit and make it like an Apollo style mission where you would dock back up to that and reuse that stage to take you back to the Kerbin. But in this case, I overkilled, and I don't need that much fuel. Go ahead and start burning. Holy shit, I might have done it too late. Oh, oh, yeah. Don't do what I did. Burn sooner than that. I don't know how my craft is still alive at this point. Those landing legs really helped. um, I really should not have done that. Should not have happened. I should be dead right now. I waited way too long to burn, but but KSP was nice to me and decided to give me another chance. I'm going to take it because I really don't want to try that orbit again. So around 5 or 10 with these landing legs, we fine. Boom. Softly landed, like it was all planned out. Um, so at this point, you would collect your science, which I would do normally in a science mode state, like save. But since I'm in creative mode, I don't need that stuff. And I'm going to close that just. And then we'll go on EVA with my pilot, and then we'll go to let go, press R, and then there's like a very small amount of gravity here. How long I'm in? Holy shit! Okay, calm down. At this point, anytime you land on a surface of a planet, you want to plant a flag because you did something awesome, and you can name it whatever you want. So I'm going to name this Oop, I gotta select it. Minmus Flats. Basically, you can name this as the biome you're in. You take a surface sample, and it'll tell you Minmus Greater Flats, the exact biome you're in. And so once you put a flag down, you name it. So when you come back to Minmus, you won't land in the same place every time. You'll land somewhere else and get more data from a different location. But in this case, I don't need the data. You would take a surface sample, an EVA report, and then you would collect that data. And then you would go back to Earth or Kerbin, wherever you want to choose. Go ahead and in this case, you don't need a ladder because of how low gravity is. But if you were to land on Duna or Eve, you would definitely need a ladder for your lander. Because if not, you're not going to be able to get back in your crew capsule and you'll be stuck. So at this point, we don't need one. So we're going to just go ahead and just turn on SES. And then we're going to go ahead and throttle up and press G to bring your gear back up. And then you can go ahead and turn that engine off because you don't need nearly as much power to get off the surface of the planet. Because look, I'm already 31 meters per second. And I'm already like way up here. And you could check your Apple apps. Go ahead and burn pretty much 45 or 80 until you get to about 100 meters per second. You pretty much start burning flat at this point. Once you get above the hills of Minmus, you're pretty much good to go ahead and just get into an orbit. Check my orbit again. Yeah, I'm way up here now, 70 or 7,000 meters. I'm going ahead and plan out my maneuver again. See how much I'm going to need to get to an orbit, and it's not very much. Less than 100 meters per second. Just enough to get to an orbit. That's all you need. It's probably a really low orbit, which you get a pretty good view of what's going on if it's a low orbit like this, and you make sure you don't hit any mountains on your orbit. Go ahead and start burning. See, once it flips like that with the camera, you know you're in orbit. Go ahead and cancel that, and then warp to the apoapse again, and then you want to raise that up to be pretty much the same height as that, so around 9 or 10 meters above the surface will be plenty. Nine or 10. We get around 9 or 8. That's plenty. See, I have so much fuel, and I can literally probably land on the moon if I wanted to with this. I'm not going to. I'm going to go ahead and just do what I came here to do. Land and return. There's Kerbin right there. You want to go ahead and plan your maneuver. Since we're rotating this way, like we're supposed to, all you have to do is burn prograde in the direction against the planet's orbit rotation, which is that way. So you zoom out and you can see the orbit line, and you want to put your maneuver node there and burn prograde way too much. It doesn't take very much to get off the surface of Minmus, which is probably one of the best places to go for new people in the game. It does not take at all, a lot to do it, like bare minimum amount of fuel, and even the little crappy thrusters that I'm using right now are plenty to do this. They got another encounter with Minmus. That was not intentional, but just to get us an escape trajectory and get us into a path that we can change mid-course correction and get us into an orbit that will get us into the atmospheric line of Kerbin, which will slow us down. So I'm going to warp to that maneuver and select it on the nav ball, and then I'm going to go ahead and start burning. I guess this you don't need to wait as long to get in it to escape burn. You can just go ahead and start burning prograde whenever you get close to the maneuver. Then you shut it off when you have an escape trajectory. And then you go to your apoapse, and you can check and see if you have enough fuel to even capture around Kerbin, which I do. But some cases you may or may not, so you want to try and plan it out and see if you do or not, and see if you have to do a recovery or whatever. See, I have an encounter with the moon already, which was not planned at all, but you can still do it. If you're trying to do like flybys to get data, you can do that. Just getting a flyby by the moon or flyby by Minmus or whatever you're trying to do. But in this case, I was not trying to get one. I'm going to... See, that put me onto an escape trajectory. You're getting speed off the surface of the moon. The moon's gravity is causing a effect on your craft that's giving it more speed, because you're basically slingshotting off the gravity of the planet you're trying to go through. So right now, me passing by the moon on this orbit will send me flying out of Kerbin's like orbit, I guess you would say. So in this case, I'm going to not do that, and I'm going to wait until I get an encounter that's not going to have a moon encounter. Burn prograde or retrograde. I'm going to go ahead and just do that. Warp here. In this case, probably want to go ahead and select Kerbin so you can get a better view of what's going on. So we're not in Minmus anymore. We're going to be going to Kerbin. So I'm going to select Kerbin, and then I'm going to select my maneuver node, like that. It's going to be another retrograde burn. Go ahead and burn that. I'm getting another counter with the moon, or Minmus. What fucking this? How close is this gonna be? Probably not that close. Okay, we can do a flyby, whatever. We can get us a little bit of a cool view of the moon as we're flying by. Just coming back around, and here we are. So this is basically going to speed up our craft because we're getting the effect of the moon's gravity pulling us towards the surface of the moon at the same time as our escape velocity from Minmus. So that's going to speed us up, which will cause our craft to have to slow down again when we get over here. We might have to do another burn just so we're not going too fast so we don't burn up in the atmosphere trying to come back down. But in this case, I'll let y'all see this little bit of encounter from what we were last video. We were there last video. But this time we're passing by saying hi to our landing site, and we're gonna go ahead and just zoom up. Go ahead and just plan out and see how much fuel it would take to lower our there's plenty of fuel to do it, I think, maybe. But I don't know if that would speed us up or not. It would probably speed up a lot. I'm probably just going to loop around one more time. Go back to Apple Apps. And then I'm going to just go burn prograde or retrograde again. And then lower that periapse down into the atmospheric plane of Kerbin instead of trying to waste all that fuel trying to get an encounter that way. We got another encounter with the moon just wrapping around, which this encounter would lower our periapse again for free instead of having to burn. It would just lower us down one more time. The other one would, the last one would have put us into an escape trajectory. This one's putting us into a capture. This time I'm going to ignore that and just burn. And watch the periapse come down. It needs to be around between 70 and 40 meters above the surface. This is what you would do to get an aero capture. It's basically using the atmosphere to slow us down. I'm going to go around. Well, that's probably too low. Let me go ahead and burn prograde a little bit, just a puff. $40. Okay. And then I'm going to warp here. I don't know why the moon is still selected. Let me go ahead and okay. And then once you're here, you just get to a retrograde. And since it's already selected orbit on the nav ball, that is not a worry. Just get pretty low. You want to get as close to periaps as possible to burn. You don't want to get into the atmospheric line too close. Go ahead and lower that down below 3,000 meters per second. If it goes too fast, we'll burn up and blow up. We don't want that. I'm going to try and get us to around 2,500 meters per second. This is getting pretty hot already. Might have to detach. Go ahead and start spinning just in case if our parts decide to want to explode. Spinning on a craft basically reduces the amount of stress and heat on each part of the craft. It's kind of a cheap way of making sure none of your parts detach or break off. Just kind of cheating, but who cares? If it works, it works. If I were to stop right now, it'd probably start giving me red markers on things, but it's not for some reason. Just let this engine burn out and go empty, and then I'm going to go ahead and angle my craft, and then I'm going to flop that, make sure it doesn't blow up. Don't blow up on me. Okay. Then I want to just turn it retrograde again. Let that shield take up all that heat for you. And then you're going to let this thing descend. And then once this parachute over here turns white, not yellow, not red, white, you want to turn it, you want to activate it and deploy your chute, and you'll be safe. And that'll be the end of the mission. Once you land it and recover the craft, that's it. Most of the time, you would probably want to land in the ocean, but I think I'll be okay to land on the surface. Gives you a good view of what's going on. I got y'all on the light side so you can see better. But when on the re-entry heating, this heat shield has a limited amount of ablator, which is the stuff that reflects the heat. But these things are really overpowered. You could do multiple passes of this and not use all of this up. You probably do like 4 or 5 passes. Oh, it turned white, so I can press spacebar and activate my chute, and I can change on my chute the altitude in which my chute like fully deploys, just in case if there's a mountain in front of you like there is for me. I'll make sure that I'll have my chute deployed before I get to the surface. Go ahead and detach my heat shield so that it will create less weight. Here we go. Bye. Bye. Go away. Shoot, I am gonna land on the mountain, but hopefully it won't flip out and blow up. That's probably why you want to land in the water instead of on the surface, because you have things like this that you land on, and you may have a bad landing and cause your craft to roll down the hill and explode. In this case, I'm afraid it may. Yeah, this is like the long part of the mission. You can't really do anything but wait. The whole mission took like an hour. I just now realized how long I've been recording for. Um, but it slows down, so I feel like I'm about to hit the surface. It's kind of flat. It may not roll down too bad. There's ways to stop that from happening. You can probably land with the closest you can to how the land looks. Like you can adjust your capsule to land pretty much flat up against it like that and stop it instead of like landing on an angle and maybe clipping it out and rotating it down the hill. You can try to flatten out your surface to land on the angle that it is, which I did, and I landed. And I'm going to recover vehicle, and that's the end of the mission done. That took a long time. I didn't expect us to make a whole hour video on how to land on Minmus, but I did. But yeah. If you enjoyed this more in-depth tutorial on how to make maneuver nodes and land on the surface of planets and all this other stuff and all this other good junk, just make sure you leave a like on this video and subscribe to this channel for more content like this. And make sure you hit that post notification bell to stay notified on my future videos. And yeah, until next time, have a good day and peace out.